Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. I'm a 22-year-old female and I met my husband, Evan, 24, at the cafe close to my college. He used to work there as a barista while I would visit often with my friends or by myself for a break. At first, I didn't really notice Evan, but eventually, after becoming a regular customer, Evan and I sort of started talking and became quite good friends. It was there itself that I found out that Evan didn't belong to the same financial status as me. Most of his family had dropped out of college or school, and so had Evan within his first year of college. Most of them just worked minimum wage jobs here and there. Honestly, I had absolutely no problem with that because why would I judge anyone based on their financial status anyway? Evan was an amazing friend to me, and we got along so much that we had even introduced each other to our friends. So we started bonding, and right after a couple of months had passed by, we both realized that this bond wasn't really just a platonic bond, it was a romantic one. This kind of scared me because I belonged to a quite wealthy family. I was scared of my parents' judgments, and even though I tried to live a grounded life, it is almost immediately noticeable that I come from a privileged family. Well, even through that fear of rejection from my family, I continued to date Evan. And as fate had it, our relationship just became stronger and stronger as each day passed by. During this phase of dating Evan for 2 years, I didn't really see any red flags. Yes, I had started helping him financially quite frequently, but that was only when he asked me to, and that too for things that would be beneficial for our relationship, like a couple of courses that would land him a better job. Unfortunately, that money would go into waste because Evan would either quit the course in between or just not bother to enroll in the first place. This happened a couple of times, and it started arguments between us, but nothing as crazy that would cause a rift between the two of us. At that point, it had taught me the lesson that this man just wasn't interested to grow his career, so I let it be. Eventually, after dating for 2 years, Evan and I talked about engagement and marriage. We knew we had to face my parents one day or the other, and it was about time. So it was around Christmas, and we decided to fly to my home state to celebrate with them. We met them and had a nice meal before we sat to talk. That is where I introduced my parents to Evan, and the questions began. My parents did seem quite nosy, yes, but I think that is expected from parents who had just met their child's partner for the first time. Surprisingly, their reaction to him, coming from a different background than us, wasn't as bad as I thought. In fact, it was Evan who seemed to get irritated at every passing moment, and I honestly had no idea why. Well, they finished talking, and my parents eventually pulled me aside to talk. I thought after their interaction that they would be able to accept him, but although what they said irritated me initially, now that I think about it, they were quite literally words of gold. They said nothing but that they wanted me to sit down and rethink, reconsider, and just reevaluate everything. At that time, it had annoyed me, but now that I think about it, this was some advice I truly needed. Well, I turned a blind eye to them, and after the completion of the trip, we flew back home. At that point, I had already met Evan's family a couple of times, so all that was left was to get engaged. So I brought Evan an engagement ring to propose to me, and we got engaged. My parents seemed happy for us, and for some reason, Evan's family is on top of the moon over this engagement. They all kept telling him how much he had lucked out, how much he had done an amazing job, yada yada. It was like their praises just felt a little off to me, but I chalked it up to me comparing my parents' reaction to them. Well, we stayed engaged for another year and then started planning for our wedding, which was obviously going to be paid for by me and my family. During this time, my family met Evan's family for the first time, and that is when all hell broke loose. Apparently, it enraged my parents that Evan's family wasn't going to be contributing anything for the wedding. I sat them down privately and explained to them how these people could barely afford to get by themselves, so they obviously could not afford a wedding. This sparked an argument between the three of us where my parents went on about how they thought this marriage was a terrible idea, blah, blah, blah. I just stayed quiet and I heard them speak as I knew they'd come around it eventually. Well, they did. They wrote me a check for my wedding, but as soon as they reached back home, they had blocked me on all forms of social media. I was dumbfounded at this and devastated. I cried for hours and hours on end, and it was Evan's family who comforted me and made me feel like their own. So I just decided to go along with the wedding. It's been a couple of months since Evan and I have been married. Nothing seemed to be off here. It was just like we had moved in closer to his family and spent more time with them. My parents didn't reach out to me either during this time period, and although it hurt like hell, I was able to work through this grief with the support of the family who I thought loved me. Boy, was I wrong. So, my husband and I were yet to go on our honeymoon. Evan and I often went on solo trips together, so Evan suggested that we take his family along with us this time since it had been years that they didn't go on a trip. Although that wasn't what I wanted to do, I thought that they did deserve a thank you gift for being here for me when my own parents weren't. So we booked a trip to Hawaii with all the money left over from the wedding after not inviting anyone from my side of the family, and we flew over. The trip had been going amazingly well. We went to a couple of beaches, lived at a good hotel, and went to good restaurants and so on. I had no problem chipping in for most of the trip because I love these people. I thought they loved me as well, but what happened next just made me question everything. So it has been a week since we're on this trip, and we had another week of it left. On this particular day, we're at my and my husband's hotel room enjoying alcohol when I decided to use the washroom. I go inside and do my business as I hear my sister in law say my name and start laughing. Her laugh is followed by my mother in law, brother in law laughing, and my father in law saying something along the lines of how he thinks this is wrong. So, out of curiosity, I decided to listen to their conversation more clearly. And oh boy, saying that my heart sank to my stomach would be an understatement. I stood there, hearing my sister in law and brother in law appreciate my husband for getting himself a rich bimbo wife. They made fun of me for how dumb I was for thinking that they actually cared. And worst of all, they talked about how they made my parents cut off contact with me by telling them that if they didn't stay away from me, they'd make my life miserable. I immediately started tearing up and recalling everything my parents had warned me about. I felt stupid and numb as I stood there reevaluating all my life decisions. I just knew I had to get out of there, and that too without these people. So the very next day, after pretending that absolutely nothing was wrong the entire night, I got a cab to the airport and flew back home. I first packed up a lot of my important documents and clothes and drove myself to my friend's house. That is where I am currently. Absolutely unsure of what to do. I'm ashamed, embarrassed, and guilty. I feel like I have let my parents down after everything that they have done for me, and I'm not really sure how to fix it. My phone has already started blowing up by Evan and his family asking me where I'm at. I know this isn't even the start of all the horrible, hate-filled texts that they're going to be sending me because they have no money to return back home. I feel like I'm going crazy and just don't know what steps to take. So, Reddit, AITA, for leaving my husband and his family stranded in another city with no money after they confessed that they all were just using me for money. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and I firstly want to apologize for not posting this update earlier. I was very much caught up with trying to sort everything. But to start off, after reading all your advice and talking to my friends, I decided to fly back to my parents' city to see them. I didn't call or text them, I just went to their place. As soon as I was greeted by my mom at the door, I think the realization hit the both of us, and we held each other and started crying in each other's arms. She then invited me in. I sat down and told her everything. Her facial reaction told me immediately that she wasn't surprised at any of this, just disappointed that I had to go through so much. She just held me tight in her arms as she called out my dad. My dad immediately dropped everything he was doing and drove home to see me. This is when I knew I was with my people. It was like all the horrible anxiety, the gut instincts that I had just faded away, and I felt nothing but my parents' warmth. After a long crying session, my dad and I talked and we discussed the legalities of the situation. I informed him that I wanted to file for divorce immediately and wanted nothing to do with Evan and his family. My dad booked an appointment with his lawyer, who I met the very next day. He informed us that this divorce would be a pretty smooth one since we were only married for a short while, and splitting of assets won't be an issue because of the same. I felt quite calm after hearing this and thanked him as well as my dad for their assistance. I'm currently back at my parents' place reading all the messages my soon to be ex husband and his family left me. It was quite funny to see how their texts ranged from apologies to anger filled texts. Evan has gotten his friends into sending me all these texts too, and this does nothing but reduce the respect I had left for him. All I'm waiting for currently is to see him for the last time to serve him and then cutting off contact with him forever. My last post was a month ago, and I did not update in between because I wanted my final update on this post to be a compilation of everything that has gone down so far. So, for starters, I am finally divorced from Evan, and I have never been happier. I have moved back to my parents' state where I'm currently living in a house close to my parents. I've started to spend more time with my childhood friends who I had lost contact with ever since I started dating Evan. Yes, he had pushed me away from them. It feels refreshing to be back in touch and to know that I'm not as alone as Evan and his family made me feel. As for Evan, I met him outside at a cafe for the last time, and it was funny because he thought I was there to apologize to him. He had no idea that I had gone back to my parents, and so just believed that I would crawl back to him. He started off the conversation by asking me for money to return to his friends who he loaned it from to return back. I laughed at his face before serving him the divorce papers and the eviction notice to vacate my house. He looked shocked, and his entitlement turned into apologies as he realized he had just lost his walking bank account. I wasn't having any of it, and I just got up and left. But boy, the change of attitude coming from his family from there on left me shocked. They had been trying to convince me day and night to take back my ex. Currently, as far as I've heard, Evan has moved in with his parents into a cramped up apartment. He has lost most of his friends after they found out everything that truly happened. Honestly, I don't feel even a bit of remorse for these people, and I hope karma keeps getting to them. Lastly, I want to thank you all for your amazing advice and making me realize that I can do so much better. NTA, but how are you going to say there were no red flags? This post is filled with them from the starting till the end. I'm completely on the parents' side here. NTA, get a divorce before it's too late and children get involved. If he can manipulate you so much already, I can only imagine things getting worse as you guys get more closer. Please also enroll yourself into therapy. I'm a 25-year-old female, have an average paying job doing body piercing, so I earn enough to live off. My friend Lottie, 24, female, who I had been friends with since I was little, did not come from a financially fortunate family and has no job. Extra info: no disabilities, mental disorders, or anything at all to stop her working. And she has a public transport pass. So ever since I got a job, 16 years old, I supported her financially, treating her to meals and trying to help her avoid takeaways for her well being. I even paid for clothes for her. When she was 18, I paid for quarter of her apartment rent and hair salon appointments. Keep in mind she is on government benefits. This continued, which is absolutely fine, and she always told me she liked the unemployed life as the reason she didn't work. All was okay until I officially started making more money, 21 years old. I began treating her to more designer clothes and shoes, but nothing like Gucci or Chanel. As a treat for being a good friend, she began to meet a few friends, whom of which never knew her financial situation, I presume, and would only wear her best designer clothes around them, and high heels plus jewelry. I was happy she was wearing them confidently. She started to ask to bring her friends over to my house a lot. I do not know these people, met a few times, but not introduced properly. And I was okay with that as I know that she was a bit insecure until it became every single week. One night, she asked to throw a quiet, casual gathering at my house while I was at my boyfriend's, which I was entirely fine with. Well, what do I come back to? Beer bottles everywhere. My stuff thrown about the place, my cat scared, my clothes ripped, and multiple of my practice piercing ears ripped. There were even used tampons on the bathroom floor, and vomit was everywhere. I collected my cats and briefly went to my bedroom, which thank goodness had a lock. Whilst waiting for everyone to leave, I heard Lottie and her friend talk. Lottie was talking about how she was grateful that her friends came to her house and that Lottie was making £60,000 a year. She said something along the lines of, "Yes, if you ever need any designer, let me know and I'll buy you some." And that's how I found out all the designer clothes she didn't wear that I bought her were given to her friends, all have jobs. So when everyone left, I was furious. I stormed at her and shouted, "Give me my stuff back and get a job. I will not be supplying for you at all, and I want my stuff back. You're an adult and grown up enough to stop acting like I'm your mummy." She refused to give me my stuff back, so I told her if she didn't give me my stuff back, I would tell her friends about it all. So she obliged and started acting the victim by saying, "But I don't want to work." So I told her to get out, and she did. I spent 3 hours cleaning my place, and 2 weeks later, I'm still friends with her, but getting calls from her begging to have money. Everyone in my life thinks I'm an AH for this update. We aren't friends anymore. NTA, but girl, if you can go to therapy, because I think it will help you unpack why you let this woman ride your back for so long. NTA, she's a lifelong mooch and not your friend. You have no responsibility for her life and financial situation. You never did. Of course, she likes the unemployed life and doesn't want to work. She's getting a free ride off the government and your hard work. I will say you did kind of set yourself up for this by feeding into her mooching behavior ever since childhood. But you're both adults now, and able bodied adults have to work, whether we want to or not. That's just life. You really would be doing yourself a favor to cut her and anyone else who doesn't see what an ungrateful leech she is out of your life, and find better friends who truly appreciate when you decide to treat them and don't just constantly have their palms out for your money. I was heavily conditioned to put myself last and always people please as I was growing up. I've been in and out of therapy for 20 years, and let me tell you, it takes work. Going is a good first step. It'll take time, but you'll make it. You can break these habits. And let me tell you, as a disabled person, I want to forcefully insert some sense into your friend manually across her face, if you know what I mean. Most disabled people would love to have the ability to work again, to not have the limits they have. Someone like that makes us look so bad. I wish you strength and happiness, but don't be too hard on yourself for having given her money all these years. NTA.